When I first started getting interested in preserving food, I honestly didn't have some big homesteading plan in mind. It started with something much simpler, a dehydrator. And while it served its purpose, it just wasn't quite enough. We eventually decided we needed to invest in something for long-term food storage. And that's when the beast walked into our lives. Our Harvest Right freeze dryer. We had no idea how much food we were actually throwing away until we started looking at preservation in a completely different way. Don't get me wrong, dehydration is great, but freeze drying, that takes the process to another level. Because when you're living on a piece of property that you're trying to turn into a homestead, you start thinking differently about everything. You start thinking about where your food is going to come from. You start thinking about growing your own vegetables. You start thinking about fruit trees. You start thinking about what happens when you have a really good harvest. And that's when I realized my little dehydrator might not be enough. Because when you're growing food, the goal isn't necessarily to grow just enough for today. The goal is to grow enough so that you can preserve some for tomorrow. Now, I have to admit, when I first started researching freeze dryers, I thought, do I really need one of these? Because let's be honest, they're not exactly a small purchase. And I already had a dehydrator that worked perfectly well. So why would I need a freeze dryer? But the more I learned about freeze drying, the more I realized that there was a pretty big difference between the two. Dehydrating removes moisture from food using heat. Freeze drying takes a completely different approach. The food is frozen, and the moisture is removed through a process called sublimation. And what really caught my attention was that the process could do for a long-term food storage. Freeze-dried food can retain much of its original shape, flavor, and texture compared with traditionally dehydrated food. And when it's properly packaged and stored, it can last for years, many years. And suddenly I wasn't just thinking about snacks anymore. I was thinking about our future homestead. I started imagining a pantry filled with food that we had grown ourselves. Food that we had preserved ourselves. Food that didn't have to be eaten immediately because it wasn't going to spoil. And I was completely different way of thinking about food. So after we bought the 28 acres, we decided to take the plunge and we bought a freeze dryer. And let me tell you, there is something really exciting about that first batch. You put the food in, you start the machine, and then you wait. And when you finally open it up, there's this moment where you look at the food that used to contain a tremendous amount of water, and now it's completely light and dry. It's almost hard to believe. And then there comes the fun part, taste testing. Because obviously somebody has to make sure it turned out right. And that's when I really started understanding why freeze drying could become such an important part of our homestead journey. Our goal isn't to become completely self-sufficient overnight. We're building this one step at a time. The land came first, then the plans, then figuring out how we're going to make this property work for us. We've got our temporary tiny house set up while we work toward our forever home. We're figuring out the roads, water, and growing foods, storage, and everything else that might come into turning raw land into a homestead. The food preservation is just another piece of that puzzle. The dehydrator was there when I needed it. It taught me that preserving food didn't have to be complicated. It taught me to look at extra food as an opportunity instead of waste. And now the freeze dryer is taking that idea to another level. I'm excited about what we're going to be able to do with it once we really get our gardens going. Imagine harvesting a huge batch of tomatoes, or being able to preserve them, or having more strawberries than we could possibly eat, or harvesting vegetables from the garden and putting them aside for the winter, or making gifts for friends and neighbors. Instead of worrying about eating everything before it goes bad, we'll have another option. Preserve it, store it, and enjoy it later. And honestly, that's one of the things I'm most excited about with this whole homesteading journey. It's not just 28 acres. It's about learning how to use it. It's about learning skills that maybe we should have learned a long time ago. It's about becoming a little less dependent on running to the grocery store every time we need something. And it's about building something that can hopefully provide for us for many years to come. When I look back, it's kind of funny to think that this whole journey started with that little dehydrator. At the time, I didn't realize it was the beginning of something much bigger. It was just a machine sitting on my counter. But it introduced me to the idea of preserving what we have. And now, years later, we're sitting on 28 acres in New Mexico, building our homestead and planning our forever home. And that little dehydrator has turned into a freeze dryer, which seems pretty fitting. Because that's really what this entire journey has been about. Starting small, learning as we go, and slowly turning an idea into something real. We have a long way to go. There are going to be plenty of challenges along the way. We're going to have successes, failures, and probably a few what were we thinking moments. But that's part of the adventure. This isn't about having everything figured out. It's about learning how to do things ourselves and build a life we dreamed about, one project at a time. And now that we have the freeze dryer, I can't wait to see what we do with it. Because someday when we're sitting on our porch at the forever home, looking out across these 28 acres, I want to be able to look back with all these little steps and remember where it all started. With raw land, a dream, and a little dehydrator.
Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you.